Evening falls over Delhi imperceptibly, like a fog, smoothly covering everything that is under it. The soft orange light fades on the horizon, and the sky gradually turns into one endless gray plain, where the cloud lines are lost in the haze. In this opaque void, high above the ground, two planes are moving. Two metal shadows that will never see each other. They won't have time, they won't be able to, despite all the equipment on board, despite the experience of their crews. One gets up, the other one is declining. There's only 1,000 feet between them, but that 1,000 feet will disappear faster than a person can blink. Passengers on both flights don't even know how fragile the line separating a normal flight from a tragedy is. They're sitting in chairs, thinking about home, waiting for a warm dinner, or planning future purchases. Someone is sleeping, someone is reading, someone just looks out the window, seeing only a milky white sky. Everything seems normal, everything seems clear, and all this is based on one person, on one voice on the air, which should separate dozens of metal giants along one narrow air corridor. How did it happen that two planes listening to the same words, flying along the same route thread, ended up on a collision course? Who made a mistake? And did anyone have even a second to change the outcome? The answers are not on the surface. They are hidden in a chain of understatements, unclear instructions, language barriers, outdated technology, and one common hope that everyone had back then, that everything was going according to the rules in the skies over Delhi. But the truth always starts earlier. We need to return a few hours before the collision, to where everything looked familiar, calm, and routine. Shymkent, the international airport in the south of Kazakhstan. Here, among the concrete slabs and old hangars, stands a huge, heavy, tired Il-76, a Soviet-built aircraft that has gone through everything: military cargo routes, night flights, a change of several owners. Now it serves to transport people who do not have money for big airlines, but there is hope for big earnings in another country. 27 passengers are boarding, traders from Kyrgyzstan, merchants who are going to India to buy textiles. They will buy fabrics in Delhi, return home, sell them in the markets, and earn a living. For them, this flight is not a trip, not a vacation, not a romance. It's a job, the opportunity to feed families, survive difficult times, and survive where it is difficult to survive. The crew consists of 10 people. Soviet school, strict discipline, the habit of working in the noise, cold, and without frills. They are familiar with this aircraft on an instinctive level, where it makes noise, where it vibrates, how slow the engines react. This is an experience that cannot be replaced by a textbook. The airline keeps afloat only thanks to such charters. Money is tight, flights are few, but every flight gives you a chance not to close completely. At 15:55 Indian time, the four-engine giant accelerates along the runway, rises into the air, and goes into the gray Kazakh sky, gaining altitude. There are about 4 hours of the route ahead. So far, everything is going perfectly. At the same time, another plane lands in Delhi, almost the opposite of the Kazakh one. A huge Boeing 747 operated by Saudia. He flew in from Jeddah, has already passed pre-flight checks, and will fly back in a couple of hours, now towards the Arabian Peninsula. There are almost 300 people on board. These are not tourists. These are the workers. Their path is the path of thousands of Indian families who depend on those who fly to the Gulf countries for work. The plane is huge, modern, well-maintained. The crew is experienced, disciplined, and rested. The commander is a 44-year-old Saudi, almost 10,000 hours in the sky. Next to him is an American co-pilot, a man with serious training. Behind him is a flight engineer who knows every jumbo valve. Their task is simple: rise above the clouds of Delhi, get on the train, turn around towards Jeddah, and deliver their passengers home. It's like 100 times before. But what unites these two flights? One is from a poor region, one is from a rich country. One is an old cargo plane, the other is a huge airliner. Different cultures, different routes, different goals. But one thing unites them. The people inside both planes fly for earnings, for the opportunity to provide for their loved ones. They don't even realize that their fates will be intertwined in the sky, and that this meeting will become one of the most terrifying pages in the history of aviation. 2 hours after departure, the Il-76 reaches the Lanka point. This is the entrance to India's complex airspace. A message is sent to the Delhi dispatcher. The plane is approaching at 25,000 feet. The crew is requesting permission to descend. The answer comes quickly, clearly, and without emotion. Descent to 20,000 feet is allowed. So far, everything is according to plan. But at this moment, another event is happening in Delhi. The Saudi Boeing 747 is allowed to start pushing out of the terminal. And now 2 planes, a huge Soviet IL and a heavy jumbo, are under the control of one person. One voice, one dispatcher, who today will need to separate them in a deadly narrow air corridor. A thick evening haze has already hung over Delhi, like a translucent blanket that dims the lights of the city and makes the sky even denser. In this gray silence, the Boeing 747 begins to slowly turn around to the beginning of the runway, like a huge ship preparing to leave the port. A faint sunset light barely makes its way through the clouds. It is reflected on the hull of the jumbo, giving it the appearance of a moving metal mountain. The crew is undergoing the latest procedures. Valves, system pressure, cable connections, and engine operation are checked. The voices are steady, confident, without a hint of haste. The commander gives short commands, the co-pilot confirms, the flight engineer controls the parameters. Everything is familiar, everything has been worked out for thousands of hours. Outside, a light fog hides some of the distant lights, but this does not cause alarm. This is normal weather for the Saudi crew. Delhi is not an easy place, but they have been here many times. They know that they need to stick to the frequency, listen to the dispatcher, and keep the set levels. This is not a night when anyone should be afraid of the sky. But the atmosphere in the cockpit changes as soon as the dispatcher's voice sounds in the headphones. Saudia 763, cleared for takeoff. For huge motors give the canvas a slight vibration. The plane begins to move, accelerates, gaining speed with every second, as if it is trying to escape from the heavy air of Delhi. Inside, someone tightens their grip on the armrests. Someone closes their eyes. Someone is praying. Someone is thinking of a family far across the sea. 1, 2, 3, the giant rises into the air. The wings act out the airflow, the flaps are gradually retracted. The plane disappears into a thick layer of clouds, and from that moment on, the entire flight turns into an instrument flight. No city lights, no horizon, just gray nothingness all around. Meanwhile, about 100 kilometers to the north, the Kazakh Il-76 is already beginning to decline. His crew still hears the same name of the dispatcher, Dutta, and trusts him as much as the Saudi crew, because the dispatcher is their only reference point in the complex, multi-layered airspace of India. But what happens in the cockpit of the Il-76 is different from the clear and concise rhythm of the jumbo jet. Here, every word of the dispatcher goes through a chain of translations. The radio operator is the only one who speaks English confidently enough to negotiate. He listens to the dispatcher's phrases, translates them into Russian, and transmits them to the navigator and pilots. Next, the navigator converts feet to meters. It all takes seconds, sometimes long ones. It is in these seconds that the fate of the entire flight lives. The atmosphere in the Delhi control tower is different. There is fatigue and tension in the air. There are paper strips scattered on Dutta's desk, the only accounting system available to him. There are only a few glowing dots on the screen. He knows that each point represents dozens, sometimes hundreds of lives, and each of them moves in a dense and unfortunate configuration of airspace. In 1996, there is no normal civil navigation structure around Delhi. Instead of several corridors, there is only one. A narrow air tunnel through which both departures and arrivals go. He knows it's dangerous. Everyone knows. But there is no alternative. And so far, he's working in an environment where every mistake can cost too much. He sees two dots, Saudi Arabia and the Kazakh side. They are moving towards each other, but with a height difference. Dutta expects that a vertical separation of 1,000 feet will make the situation safe. Everything is based on the fact that the pilots will observe their echelons, and he will have time to fix the changes. Saudi Arabia is requesting confirmation of recruitment. Il-76, confirmation of the decline. There is no excitement in their voices. They are sure that they are hearing everything correctly. They are sure that the dispatcher sees what is happening. There are only clouds and emptiness outside. When the jumbo reaches the 10,000-foot level, Dutta permits recruitment to 14,000. This is the standard altitude on the route. The liner smoothly rises higher and higher, while its huge wings smoothly dissected the viscous cloud masses. The cabin is stable, the instruments show a set, the engines are running without the slightest deviation. At the same moment, the Il-76 is coming from a level of 20,000 feet, and it is allowed to descend to 15,000. On paper, there is an ideal scheme. One goes down to 150, the second goes up to 140. There's a safe 1,000 feet between them, but everything works better on paper than in reality. The radio operator in the Kazakh cockpit listens to the dispatcher's voice. He understands it, translates it, repeats it, but translation is always a risk. And the words 150 and 14,000 sound too similar, too easily misunderstood. In the noise of the cockpit, where the navigator is talking at the same time, the captain is discussing the parameters, the engineer is asking questions, phrases can merge, and the most important figure may sound different than it was said. The fog is thickening. Il-76 crosses another layer of clouds. There is only white emptiness behind the glass. There are meters on the first pilot's altimeter. There are feet on the duplicates, and each device shows something different. This gives the feeling that everything is under control, but in fact it creates a shaky platform on which the entire flight rests. At the same time, Jumbo is steadily rising to its echelon. There is no visibility, but the instruments are perfect. There is calmness in the cabin. Pilots know that as soon as they are told to maintain altitude, they will do it. And they did smoothly without sudden movements. They go out to 14,108 feet. It's almost perfect. The dispatcher records their mark on paper. On the screen, two dots continue to move towards each other. With every passing second, the two glowing dots on the radar are getting closer. Dutta sees their approach but does not see the height. He does not hear the alarm in the voices of the crews, because there is none. Both sides are confident that they are following the instructions. Both sides believe that they are at their echelons. But right now comes the very moment when the dispatcher breaks his silence about oncoming traffic for the first time. This was supposed to be a warning signal, the very red thread that the crews had to notice. Dutta takes the microphone and speaks into the air. Traffic 12 o'clock. Reciprocal. Saudia Boeing 747 at 10 miles. Report in sight. There is a pause in the Il-76 cabin. Not harsh, not panicky. Just silence, in which only the dull hum of the engines and the whispers of the crew can be heard. The radio operator translates the dispatcher's words. The navigator is trying to determine exactly where the Saudi plane should be. The pilots look ahead, but see only a white veil of clouds. Kazakh 1907, report how many miles? The radio operator asks, not sure if they understood the first call correctly. Dutta answers, traffic is at 8 miles, level 140. At 14,000 feet, the radio operator translates. It is important. This is the key. The crew must understand that there is another plane under them. They should keep 15,000. But there was no response that could have stopped everything. Now looking, Kazakh 1907. These are the last words that the dispatcher will hear from this aircraft. Saudi Arabia receives a similar warning. Saudia 763, traffic 12 o'clock. Kazakh aviation at 6 miles, likely to cross in another 3 miles. Report in sight. The answer is calm. Looking for traffic, Saudia 763. And this is the latest message from Saudi Arabia. There is calm confidence in both cabins, at the heights assigned to them, with a distance that was supposed to be safe, with the belief that the dispatching calculations are accurate. But the calculations were accurate only in one case, if both planes strictly adhere to their echelons. In fact, there was an imperceptible but critical deviation in the cabin of the Il-76. The crew reported that they had reached 15,000 feet, but in reality the plane was at about 16,400. The phrase "reached" sounded confident, although they were still declining. Dutta believed the voice. He had to believe he had no other verification tool. The Il-76 continues to decline. It goes through 15,000 feet. At this point, the navigator or the pilots had to level the plane. But they don't do that. Sometimes it's not emotions that are behind mistakes, but routine. When you're sure you're doing everything right, you're not looking for a trick. You continue to follow the sequence. The height fluctuates, the numbers run down, but you don't feel the danger until you see it through your eyes. 14,800 feet. 14,600. 14,400. They go exactly to the echelon of Saudi Arabia, but they don't know about it. There is a white void outside. There is no visibility at all. The plane plunges into a dense cloud layer, as if into milk. And hidden in this milk is another airliner that is coming towards us. In the cockpit of the Il-76, the first person to realize that something is wrong is radio operator Igor Rep. He glances at one of the altimeters, probably the one that shows the feet. Perhaps he notices a sharp decrease. Perhaps he catches a discrepancy in the testimony. But he screams immediately, sharply, loudly. Hold the level. There is confusion in the cabin. The captain doesn't understand. What level have we been given? At this moment, there is something in the voices that was not there before. Urgency, anxiety, a feeling that the situation is already going beyond the usual. The flight engineer throws a phrase, "Maintain," but which maintainer is the one they were supposed to keep, or the one they're on now? A phrase without a number is empty. Only Rep understands what level we're talking about. Keep to level 150. Don't descend. He's literally begging to go back to 15,000. But it's too late. The captain abruptly turns off the autopilot. "Power!" he shouts, and the flight engineer applies thrust. The engines are roaring. The plane is trying to lift its nose. He's trying, but there's no time. The radio operator shouts again, his voice trembling. "Get to 150 because on the 140, that one." And at that moment he probably sees what the clouds were hiding, the huge silhouette of the jumbo approaching right at them. Two planes fly into each other so fast that the instruments do not have time to register the moment before the collision. The difference is metal by metal. 2. A bright flash in the clouds. 3. The tail of the Il-76 separates, as if thrown by a knife. The horizontal stabilizer of the 747 cuts off the tail of the Kazakh side. For a split second, the two planes seem to lock in one fiery spot and then crumble into a chaotic rain of debris. Everything happens in silence. Only after a few moments does the dull rumble of falling reach the ground. In the control room, Dutta looks at the screen. The two dots merge. They don't disperse. They blink. They disappear. The radio is silent. Only one voice breaks through the ether. Desperate, trembling, full of fear and prayer. Astaghfirullah, and one more phrase is a confession of faith. After that, nothing. Neither of the two crews is in contact anymore. The night turns strangely bright over the Indian fields of Haryana. Fragments of two planes, engulfed in fire, fall to the ground, leaving behind traces like streaked streaks of light. Earth meets metal with dull thuds. Somewhere far away, the grass flares up. Fragments of the cabin are falling somewhere. Somewhere, a twisted fragment of a wing, like a tin leaf, crunches trees. No one on Earth understands what happened at this moment. People go out into the streets, look up at the sky, and hear the echoes. Someone thinks that a substation has exploded somewhere. Someone said it was a military plane. No one assumes that the worst mid-air collision in the history of world aviation took place above them. The investigators arrive at the scene in a few hours. Their work begins before dawn, under the light of floodlights, against a background of silence, broken only by the crackling of metal, which cools down after falling. A chaotic picture opens up before them. The wreckage stretches for almost 7 kilometers. This means only one thing: the impact was such that both planes instantly lost control and flew apart in the air. But the most important thing is where the key parts lie. Among the first finds is the tail section of the Il-76, which lies at the beginning of the destruction trail. This gives the first major conclusion. The tail of the aircraft was separated almost at the moment of the collision. But there is an even more important detail. The Il-76 is an aircraft with a high-mounted tail unit. If it had passed over Saudi Arabia, the tail would not have been the first element to detach on impact. It would have been damaged much later or in another part of the field altogether. This means that the Il-76 was lower than it should have been, below its echelon, below Saudi Arabia, and Saudi Arabia was supposed to pass under it. Who went the wrong way? Who didn't hold the train? Was there a mistake in the cabin? Or is there a mistake in the control room? Or is there an error in the device? So far, there are more questions than answers. The next task is to find the flight recorders. The black boxes are the heart of the investigation. They are found in different parts of the field, one among the wreckage of the jumbo cabin, the other among the destroyed structures of the Il-76. But here a new obstacle awaits the investigators. In 1996, India did not have the equipment to decode the data from the recorders. A decision is made. Saudi Arabia's recorder is being sent to London. Kazakhstan's recorder is being sent to Moscow. The decryption will take days, and while they wait, Indian experts are studying everything that can be studied without them. They already have an audio recording of the control frequency in their hands, conversations that the crews had with each other and with the dispatcher. And it is this record that becomes the foundation for the first conclusions. The Dutta dispatcher, despite the huge workload and outdated tools, did not make a single critical mistake. His commands were precise, consistent with the procedures of the time. He gave the Il-76 echelon 150. He gave Saudi Arabia an echelon of 140. He informed both of them about the oncoming traffic. He was requesting altitude confirmation. The main thing was that he did not have the technical ability to verify that the crews were telling the truth about their actual altitude. His radar is just a screen with moving dots, without height, without speed, without convergence calculations, no collision warnings. There is not a single tool that is currently considered mandatory. While the recorders are traveling to London and Moscow, the investigators find another important clue: a set of Il-76 altimeters. There were 4 of them, and all 4 show different heights. One is 16,700 feet. The other is 14,560. The third is 14,895. The fourth is 1,720, which is probably the result of hitting the ground. What does it mean? That the crew saw in front of them not a single figure, but a set of inconsistent data. The height was not obvious, not unambiguous, and it required constant discussions and reconciliations. And it was precisely this, the different perception of height, that could have been the trigger of the whole tragedy. Finally, data arrives from London. Saudi Arabia's flight recorder shows the 747 gained altitude steadily, smoothly, and without deviation. Brought the plane to 14,108 feet. He held the train. No climbing above the allowed level. No upward maneuvers. No attempt to get to 15,000 feet. Saudi Arabia is completely in the corridor, in the permitted zone, at the predicted air point. It means it definitely could not be higher than the Il-76. This is not a Saudi mistake. A few days later, a reply arrives from Moscow, the Il-76 recorder, and there you can see the very stepwise descent. The checks confirm that the Il-76 was indeed moving down in a series of short steps, as if the crew did not immediately realize that they were losing altitude. And when they realized it, there was no more time. But why were they declining? Why didn't they hold echelon 150? What did they hear? Or more precisely, what did they think they heard? The answer is hidden in the cockpit. Inside, everything worked differently than in Western airplanes. Il-76 is a legacy of the Soviet system. 5 people in the cockpit. One who knows English at a sufficient level. The one who converts feet to meters. One who counts distances. A crew in which any phrase passes through 2 or 3 filters before it reaches the pilot who holds the helm. And the most important thing is a phrase that could become fatal. Level 14,000, the echelon of Saudi Arabia. But if you take it as a new height for yourself, if you don't distinguish in the cabin noise that we are talking about another plane, if you don't hear traffic or skip part of the phrase, then you can decide that the dispatcher gave permission to drop below 150. And it could be heard by those who were already tired of constant transfers, recalculations, reconciliations, and devices that showed different values. The final picture takes shape later, but now, at the crash site, the investigators understand that everything was solved in a matter of seconds. The seconds in which some people tried to hold the plane, others tried to lift it, and the third side went strictly in height, not knowing that the other was aiming at it. And when the 2 dots disappeared from the radar, it was all over now. The morning after the disaster is quiet in Haryana, as if the very air feels that it is impossible to speak loudly. The investigators' gaze slides over endless fragments of metal, black boxes, severed wires, pieces of cladding that yesterday were part of 2 huge machines. With each new find, the picture becomes clearer and scarier. Now all the evidence, the recorders, the negotiations, the dispatcher's testimony, the radar data, and the wreckage, must add up to one consistent story. A story in which there is no room for guesses, only facts. This story will show not a single person wanted to break the rules that evening. Not a single crew tried to evade the dispatcher's instructions. Not a single dispatcher was negligent. But the system around them was built in such a way that any small glitch, any word spoken a little quieter than necessary, any incorrectly translated term could become fatal. The government of India convenes a special commission under the leadership of Judge R.S. Lahoti. She has to figure out 2 key issues. First, why did the Il-76 continue to descend below flight level 150 when it was supposed to be held? Second, what did the strange stepwise descent profile recorded on the altitude records mean? These are not idle questions. The fate of people, the fate of airlines, and the fate of India's aviation system depend on them. At the commission meetings, the investigative team reconstructs the chronology step by step. They study every phrase from the recording of the broadcast, every second of altitude fluctuations, every command of the dispatcher. And gradually a picture emerges that surprises even the most experienced specialists. The main attention is focused on the phrase that the Il-76 crew heard when Dutta warned, "Traffic at level 14,000. There is noise in the cabin. Several people are talking at the same time. The radio operator translates English into Russian. The navigator converts feet to meters. The pilots are trying to maintain altitude using instruments that show different data. And the commission comes to the conclusion. The Il-76 crew could have perceived this phrase not as a warning about the plane below them, but as a permitted altitude for themselves. 14,000 versus 150 is just one syllable of difference, one unheard vowel, one mistake in translation, one word spoken at a time when absolutely everything needed to be heard and absolutely accurate. At the same time, the pilots knew that the dispatcher could change the altitude at any time. They are used to the fact that echelons are often reviewed in complex corridors. And if at that moment the radio operator hears 14,000 as a new permission, the chain of action starts automatically. The plane continues to descend. No one has time to double-check. The step profile is explained by delays in autopilot response and gradual alignment between individual stages. One misinterpreted echelon, and the Il-76 turned out to be at a collision altitude with a giant that was traveling strictly at the permitted level. But the commission is not limited to crew error only. She also considers the context, and the context is terrifying. There is only one air corridor around Delhi for all departures and arrivals. Most of the airspace belongs to the military. Mixed measurement systems, feet and meters, are installed on board the Il-76. There is a language barrier in the cockpit, which slows down the perception of any command. The dispatcher works on the oldest radar, which shows only dots. There are no collision warning systems. There is no normal controlled flow separation. There is no dispatcher licensing. Each of these points in itself is just a disadvantage. But altogether, the disadvantages turn into a trap from which it is impossible to get out without losses. When Lahoti announces the official conclusion, it sounds almost the same as the conclusions of many tragedies of world aviation. A combination of factors accumulated over the years eventually created a situation in which error became almost inevitable. The Il-76 radio operator misunderstood the dispatcher's phrase. The Il-76 pilots did not see the traffic visually because of the clouds. The Indian Air Traffic Management System did not provide a sufficient level of security. The dispatcher did not have the equipment to confirm the altitude. Different measurement systems have led to confusion. But the main thing is that the error of perception of the echelon was the last straw. The Commission recognizes that there was no malicious intent. There was no violation of the instructions in the usual sense. There was a vulnerable system and a human factor that once became stronger than the rules. Further events are developing rapidly. The catastrophe is becoming the impetus for massive reforms. First, English. India is appealing to the ICAO with a proposal to make at least the 4th level of English language proficiency mandatory for pilots and air traffic controllers. The proposal is accepted. Since then, English has been the standard, not the recommendation. Second, CAS. India is becoming the second country in the world after the United States to make an in-flight collision avoidance system mandatory for all aircraft. CAS is an electronic second dispatcher on board. He would have saved those 2 flights. He saved thousands of futures. Third, new corridors. The military is ceding part of the airspace. Delhi gets separate routes for arrivals and departures. A 1-lane sky turns into a multi-lane one. Fourth, licensing of dispatchers. The profession becomes official, regulated, with exams and strict rules. Dutta is one of those who was officially acquitted. He returned to work 3 days after the disaster, because he really did everything he could with the tools he had. But among all the official decisions, reforms, and protocols, there is one side of the tragedy that is rarely talked about loudly. Many of the bodies were never identified. Some of the passengers were from such poor areas that it was impossible to identify relatives. There are families who never found out what happened to their loved ones. They left and didn't come back. Where are they? Are they alive? Why don't they give you any news? They don't know. No one told them, and no one could. These people have remained unanswered forever. ChatGPT said. At dawn, the pale sun rises over Haryana, so quiet, as if it is afraid to disturb the peace of those who lie here. The fields around us look like a giant map of scattered stories. Pieces of the fuselage in the wheat, curved fragments of a wing on the side of the road, remnants of seats that yesterday held people returning to their families or seeking to earn a living. The investigators continue to walk on the grass, on the soft, already flattened ground. Their every step is cautious, as if they are afraid to break the silence. You can't speak loudly. You can't treat it like a job. Here is the memory. There are people here. Someone notices a notebook on one of the wreckage. There are beads on the other. The third one has a small silver jewelry. All of these are not just things. These are the tracks of those who believed until the last second that they would fly. While the world has not yet had time to learn about the tragedy, while the newspaper headlines have not yet been printed, before the cameras of the news channels have arrived at the scene, here, in silence, it becomes clear. 2 cars collided in the air. But then 2 more things collided, fate and circumstances. And this collision was inevitable long before the 2 airliners crossed the cloud layer. The next few weeks are a long way to find the reasons. But the catastrophe does not end at the moment of impact. It continues in the offices of ministries, in the corridors of judicial instances, in the ICAO negotiation rooms, in airlines that are reviewing their rules. Every step is painful. Every correction is a trace from that night. The Indian government has publicly acknowledged that there have been at least 10 dangerous approaches in the country's airspace in recent years. And almost all of them were with planes whose crews had problems with the English language. These statistics suddenly stop being just a number. It becomes a reality, because Charki Dadri is not an accident. This is a natural result of what has been considered an acceptable risk for years. After the disaster, Indian dispatchers go on strike. They require new radars, new corridors, new standards. They demand that their profession be recognized as official. They demand the right to education, which would guarantee safety. They can be heard. While politicians and aviation authorities are arguing, there is silence on the other side of the country, in the homes of those who have not returned. The hardest of all. Somewhere in Kyrgyzstan, a family is waiting for a merchant who promised to bring cloth and earn money, and he's not coming. Never. Somewhere in India, a worker's wife is waiting for her husband, who flew to Saudi Arabia for the sake of their children. She doesn't know what happened. She doesn't read the news. She doesn't know how to use a phone. She's just waiting, and he will wait for many more years. Every flight is always a set of stories that no one will know about. Not all the bodies were identified. Some passengers were so poor, so far removed from official registers, that it was simply impossible to connect them with their families. There are people who have disappeared from the lives of their loved ones, and those loved ones will never know where their trail ended. This is the quietest, bitterest side of the tragedy. Not technical, not legal, not political. It's human, but any tragedy must lead to a conclusion, and sometimes the conclusions become so powerful that they change the world. The Charki Dadri disaster became the starting point for a global aviation security reform. After her, the world made key decisions. English has become a mandatory standard at the ICAO level. New air corridors have appeared in many countries. Radars have been updated, secondary responses and real time altitude display have been added. Aviation services have begun to require TCAS for all aircraft. Crew training has become much more rigorous. Control systems have stopped relying solely on the human factor. And most importantly, for the first time after decades of the habit of trusting one dispatcher without additional tools, aviation realized that a person could not carry such a load alone. Not because he's weak. It's because the world has become too fast, too dense, too busy, And if the sky is to be safe, rules must be stronger than habits. Years have passed. Decades. Delhi has changed. India's aviation space has been completely rebuilt. Dispatcher licensing has become strict and mandatory. Airlines of the former USSR have received new specialists and new standards. Air Kazakhstan has disappeared. Air Astana has grown. But the Charkhi-Dadri Trail has remained forever, like a scar, a reminder that one misheard echelon can destroy 200 lives. And when pilots on modern Boeing or Airbus today see a counteraction signal on the TCAS screen, when they hear the computer voice, traffic, traffic, when they see a red diamond on the display, they follow the instructions in a second. No discussion, no doubt. Not because they don't trust the dispatcher, but because one day two large metal shadows met in the clouds, and the world did not allow this to happen again. After all, the tragedy over Charkhi-Dadri is not just a story about technology, rules, or system errors. This is a story about people, about those who flew away to earn money, about those who worked hard to bring them home, about those who sat in the control room and did everything they could with what they had, about those who were waiting for the return of their loved ones. This is a story about two planes that never saw each other until it was too late, about the sky which turned out to be too narrow, about a system that once failed everyone, and that a new era of security was born out of this mistake. An era in which every flight is not only a destination,